Welcome into this episode of Pushing the Pile. The show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Mike Renner, JP Acosta, Kyle Long. Kyle, this is a safe space.
What's up, boys?
This is a
How
safe
we
space.
doing? Happy Tuesday. You want to do this? You want to do this now? No, we're not going to do this now.
We don't have to. But last night, obviously,
Yep.
not even last night, the last week as a Bears fan has been tumultuous. We don't have to dig too deep into the Ty Dunn article that you're a series.
We can get into anything you want to get into. That's why we have our own show.
We can, but we don't have to because honestly, so if you is a 3-part series about more the Bears dysfunction.
Yep.
To me, if going through and reading it rather than, a lot of people said came away from it being like it's a Caleb Williams piece, and it really wasn't. It was more about a Bears organization that's seemingly enabling a 21-year-old to be a 21-year-old and not holding basically your number 1 overall pick to the same standard that they held everyone else in the organization to, or you should hold everyone else in the organization to. So I think a lot of people, I don't want to say had the wrong takeaway from it, but I came away just being like a lot of sour grapes from old staff members, and 2, just like this seems like organizational dysfunction that they're putting Caleb Williams in a bad situation more than like Caleb Williams is this broken quarterback that is in need of, is basically the wrong pick was kind of what everyone came away from the saying. And then last night, honestly, I went back and watched tape, and now the results speak for themselves. 27-24 loss. Minnesota Vikings win on a comeback victory. I didn't think it was – I thought there was a lot of growth from Caleb. I thought there was a lot of comfortability in this offense and a lot of the ways he handled pressure that improved night and day from year one. It's just – man couldn't hit the broadside of a barn last night down the stretch.
Yeah, and I'll speak first on the article very quickly. Had Tyler Dunn reached out to me and texted me and said, I want some on-the-record quotes about the dysfunction historically at Hallis Hall, I would have spoken honestly about my experiences with the different sets of eggshells that the members and the staff have had to walk on with the different quarterbacks that have come in and out of Hallis Hall. And if you look around the NFL, there's only a handful of places where that's not the case. Now, last year, obviously, there was massive dysfunction. And a number 1 pick with a lot of development in front of him was adopted by a broken home. And you know the impact that can have on a football player. Now his work's cut out for him, and hopefully the wounds are starting to scar. And I agree with you as it pertains to seeing development from Caleb Williams last night. And I was happy with what I saw schematically from Ben Johnson in getting Caleb Williams rolling, in allowing for him to take the checkdowns, not turtling, not taking sacks early, in the face of some busts in protection, and against the adversity of pre-snap penalties, disadvantageous down and distances, which was a theme last year too. But it was from a new guy. We saw Jonah Jackson do it. We saw Darnell Wright get the phantom call late. Look, penalties. There was like 140 yards of penalties for the Bears. That is unacceptable. Even if Caleb hits his throws, all that stuff, I would argue that you don't deserve to win if you've got over 100 yards of penalties, let alone 130 at home, pre-snap penalties at home. The crowd showed up. We were all very excited. But to your point, what we did not see in bunches or really enough was accuracy and hitting guys downfield and confidence. And JP, I know you have thoughts as well, but I was happy with Ben Johnson. I'm still excited about the Chicago Bears. I'm also going to keep in mind that this was a 14-win team last year that got a little bit better in some people's eyes. And clearly, if J.J. McCarthy is going to show up and let his freak flag fly like that in the fourth quarter, I'm a little concerned about this Vikings team in a good way for them. So I tip my cap to McCarthy, O'Connell, Josh McCown, my old teammate. But there's going to be a lot of rumblings in Chicago this morning, and I would say don't peak too soon. Don't freak out because a lot can change in a week, and let's hope accuracy is one of those things.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to panic very early about the Bears, and I also think it needs to be reminded that the Lions did not start off as the Lions that they were, that we see now or that we saw last year. It took a little bit for them to get going, especially offensively. I think the biggest thing for me was outside of the Caleb just misses, outside of Caleb Williams, 6 scrambles for 58 yards. The Bears ran the ball 20 times for 62 yards. Yeah. That's unsustainable. That is not a good way to ice a football game. That's where it really showed up in the second half after the pick 6 and you go up 17-6 and you can't put that game away.
Lead them out.
Yeah, you need to lean on them. And that's what happened. The Vikings were able to lean on the Bears to help put that game away. The Bears were not able to lean on the Vikings in the run game. I thought DeAndre Swift had a really up and down game as a runner. I thought some of the, like you said, the schematic design and some of the Ben Johnson stuff, it looked like a Ben Johnson offense, but just some of the run game stuff outside of the Caleb scrambles just were not good at all until like the second to last drive when DeAndre Swift popped off those 2 big runs. So if this is going to work with the Bears, with Chicago, I think getting the run game going is going to really help Caleb Williams because the margin for error now becomes a little bit wider. And that's when you're going to start seeing some of the I hate to say it's like the yips. I don't think he has the yips, but the mechanics throwing downfield are a little concerning. That it's always that. Like last year, I think it went under the radar because of all the sacks, but Caleb Williams was not that good throwing the ball downfield last year. And a lot of it was due to mechanical issues. And there's the miss to DJ Moore in the fourth quarter. There's the 4th and 3 bender to Cole Kmet that he sails. There's another one.
There's a couple climb the ladder balls to Rome Dunze. There's the hospital ball to DJ Moore. There's, it showed up time and time again. Even part of that 10 for 10 streak that we saw from Caleb early in the game, there were a couple triple extension climb the ladder catches for Swift. And I give credit to Flores' defense. When they're out of a rush, they get up in the air and they clog up the throwing lanes. It was a consistent theme last night. One thing that I want to keep in mind and think about the Packers-Lions game, I don't think that the Ben Johnson exodus is as important as the shuffle on the offensive line. And I know they invested on the offensive line in Chicago. We got really bright guys. We got great pass protectors. I saw Joe Tooney doing some awesome things last night in protection, peeling the defensive end off of Braxton Jones on an inside rush winner, winning one-on-ones time and time again. But is this the group that can lean on those teams physically in the run game and put games away? Because the scheme's going to be there. I hate to break it to you. The scheme was there last night. Okay.
From going back and watching the Bears run tape, I was more worried about their running back room. Now, obviously, Rashawn Johnson, I believe, wasn't healthy last night, and him coming back he's much more of an effective runner in those obvious rushing situations to try to close out games, that sort of thing that Swift just is not. And so we saw Swift get every single carry in the backfield. They weren't going to give Kyle Monangai some run there his first game as a rookie, so he got every single handoff. But I don't think this running back room is good enough right now. I think the offensive line is good enough. I think a pass pro, you saw a big leap forward from last year. That is not an easy defensive line to go against with all they show with guys like Jonathan Grenard, Javon Hargrave. And yeah, Hargrave got home a couple of times, but it is not a defensive line that is just a cupcake. And I thought they gave Caleb Williams a clean dish.
Darnell Wright got a little better last night.
Yeah. So that O-line is more than good enough. It's just, it is just the accuracy issues now with Caleb. They were probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 just wild throws. Throws that not even just, a guy, it's on his back shoulder and it hits off his fingertips. It's like, no, he was open and there was no shot of.
We call that hitting the mascot in baseball.
Yes.
In Bull Durham, he said you got to hit the mascot to start the game so that they're a little bit afraid in the batter's box. They don't know if you know where the ball's going, which is not what you want as a quarterback.
JP, do you want to – I liked your take pre-show. I don't know if you wanted to give it on the show about who Caleb's kind of reminding you of.
It's feeling a little bit like the whole Ben Simmons, Markelle Fultz thing where just like the mechanical issues are really weird right now. And the hope is that you can fix those. It's the mechanics, it's the footwork, especially the footwork. Coming from the air raid offense, they don't really teach the footwork the way that NFL coaches want footwork to be done. And it still remains to be seen if Caleb Williams can adjust to that, because on all the misses that he had deep, it's like the best way to describe it is his back foot is coming all the way up off the ground as if he's like shot putting or like throwing a javelin, and he's just sailing all these passes because not all of his cleats are in the ground, and these are in clean pockets. So the worry is that never gets fixed, and if those mechanical issues can't get fixed, then that's going to be something that the Bears will have to seriously address.
This is so frustrating because with Justin Fields, it was the total package except for the glue, like syrupy long delivery. And people would blame that, the technical aspect of his throwing motion. But everything else is desired. You know, in social circles in college, we used to call this a butterface. Okay, this is the butterface situation, right, Renner? JP smiling. I know he knows what I'm talking about. Look,
I have no clue what that means, Kyle. No.
Okay, so Caleb does so many things that is appealing to a football fan. As an offensive lineman watching him play, he's tough. I see him run. He trucked a guy going into the end zone on his first touchdown. I was jumping in front of my TV. Well, I was whisper screaming because the babies were asleep, but I was screaming a little bit. But then he does the airmail thing, and it's like, oh my goodness. And I'm not a quarterback coach, but I'm an athlete, and I've been in these spots before where I can't – when I lay in bed on Saturday night, I've had these nights as an athlete, and it's a really bad spot to be in. And I'm not saying this is where Caleb is, but I'm saying this is where an athlete's mind can go. You close your eyes. You know, the last thing your coach says in the Saturday night meeting, I want you to go upstairs, put your head on the pillow, and do what? Visualize. There was a point in my career where I would close my eyes, and the only thing I would see is getting beat. And the only thing I would see is not being able to get on my stance because I wasn't healthy enough. I don't know what he's going through, but I'm just saying the athletic mind, the human mind can be a dark place sometimes. So it's tough to evaluate what we don't know what's going on with.
Speaking of visualize, let's talk a little bit about JJ McCarthy, because he sits in a $10,000 chair before games now. He doesn't meditate on the field anymore. He doesn't meditate on the field. He meditates in a $10,000 chair in the locker room. That is apparently like a sensory deprivation.
Is this the immortal chamber, but for meditation?
He comes out of the oil like the guy from Dune. He's just like,
basically, that's what I'm picturing. And he came out of the oil late in that third quarter, because for the first 2.5 quarters, it was not good for JJ McCarthy. But that late third, into the fourth, some big boy throws. Obviously, it was very brief, but what were your initial thoughts on his performance, JP?
It really was a tale of 3 quarters and then the fourth quarter. I think what he needed was to hit a throw while getting hit. And that mug front, the out route on third down to Justin Jefferson, where he gets crushed and completes the pass, maybe that's what you need in your first game. I think a lot of guys say, like, you got to get hit, and that really starts to get the blood flowing. That starts to get the adrenaline pumping. And JJ really needed that, because what was going on was he was just getting gamed by Dennis Allen. They would show all those mugged fronts, and it was the first play of the game. They ran mesh, the shallow mesh, and then a dig behind it. And he's assuming it's man because he has mugged up front in front of him. They drop out in the cover 2, and he has to eat a sack because he doesn't know where to go with the ball. So I think what happened was KOC in the second half, especially in the fourth quarter, just simplified everything. He wasn't taking the play clock all the way down to 1, which is a problem for both teams. They took so long to get plays in, but they weren't taking the play clock down to 1. And if he had 2 exact plays, if there was one look, if they showed a mug front, get out of it. Do not run that play if it's mug. They're just going to throw a screen like they did to Justin Jefferson. But what really changed was they were able to move the ball on the ground. The best friend to a young quarterback is a run game, because it makes everything so much easier, especially for JJ McCarthy, who thrives off play action and throwing the ball over the middle of the field. I still have a lot of issues with, like, I just wonder about the arm strength. I think the pick 6 was a perfect example of that ball just dies, sort of going to the far side of the field. but the dude's tough, and he kept getting up. I think Kevin O'Connell mentioned it in post game. Like, he just kept getting up. He kept having faith in this team, and that is something that guys can rally behind.
Priceless. Getting back on the horse is priceless. Yeah, and with the comparisons coming into the game, it was like rookie versus rookie, second year versus second year that's a rookie versus a second year that was in a broken home, year one. And it just turns out the guy with little to no experience, bad or good, is pretty damn good. And the thing that stood out to me was just that fourth quarter and his willingness to run, his ability to have that short-term amnesia. He Men in Black lasered himself a couple times and just kept coming. Because you talked about those Dennis Allen fronts. I was having anxiety on the couch watching these things, these 6-7 man fronts up at the line of scrimmage. The offensive lineman in communication. Usually as an alignment, I want to turn around and say, what do you see, quarterback? But the guy's like 21 and looks like a One Direction band member. I'm not asking him anything. I'm just freaking out. But they didn't. And they just kept showing up and playing. And they were down their best offensive lineman too.
Mm-hmm. And you could feel it during the game, how much they didn't have Christian Darrisaw. That was like the first thing I tweeted after the first drive was get well soon, Christian Darrisaw.
Yeah.
Because they missed him poorly. They missed him bad. I think it was really funny on the Manning cast. The first drive when I talked about that mug front that they dropped in the Tampa 2, Peyton Manning is like, oh, it's man. You're going to have to shallow. And then they drop into Tampa 2 and he eats the sack. And Peyton's like, I'm going to be honest. I did not see that coming. And if you can fool Peyton Manning, then you're going to fool a 21-year-old quarterback. So Dennis Allen had all the answers until KOC and the Vikings just sort of simplified the game plan. And sometimes that's what you need for a rookie quarterback. You don't need to throw the entire master's program at a young guy. You just need to do the 101 stuff.
Meat and potatoes.
Yeah, I think if you're a Vikings fan, you have to be encouraged at minimum because of how easily it could have been for that guy to just go into a shell and just never come out, and just fourth quarter look exactly the same. You got a backup left tackle who's making Tano Passignon and Dio Dangbo look like all pros the whole game. You could have just panicked every single time you drop back and just, not attack down the football field. And he went the opposite way. He started really slinging it down the field there at the end. So very encouraging performance from him. But honestly, the group chat after the game, the family group chat, the biggest winners was the Green Bay Packers of this, because I think the biggest worry was one of these guys coming out and looking like a stud day one, right? Looking like they're Patrick Mahomes coming out year two. And you're just like, oh shoot, we're in trouble the rest of the division, because I think you give either of these OCs a flat out dude at quarterback and they could be right up there with Packers Lions for the top of the division. Having seen this, I think it'll be some growing pains for both here going forward.
I do want a quick shout out. I do want to shout out Brian Flores. In the second half, the Vikings had a 55.6% blitz rate. They went into the second half and were just like, F it. Let's dance with the girl that got us here. And they sent everybody. And you could tell, especially in looking at the Bears offense, you could tell that they are starting to get sped up. Because again, I think the biggest issue for me with the Ben Johnson offense and KOC for the most part was how late they were taking the play clock. Like Caleb Williams wasn't getting the ball snapped to him until there was 2 seconds left in the play clock. Like you're wasting so much time and you're letting the defense continue to stay in this look. You're not giving yourself enough time to diagnose it. And it's just, they're hammering you every single time. And I think that's going to have to be the game plan for the Vikings, to have to get pressure up front, because the guys were open. To be honest, the guys were open. And that's more of an indictment on the Vikings secondary than anything. But
yes,
if you're kind of playing the what's more important, pass rush or pass coverage game, you just blitz over half the time. It won't matter who's back there.
Oh, yeah. I did come away worried about the Vikings corner still from that game. I came into it worried and came away worried as well. All right. Every Tuesday, we're going to be doing trench takes, Kyle's trench takes. So I have an offensive line take from the week that was, JP's Playbook, where he breaks down some schemes he loved, and then my rookie report to really tie a bow on the week that was, coming up right after this.
You can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus. So even if you can't count on accurate expiration dates...
That is a rookie mistake.
Or people appreciating your fashion sense...
Jim, the crowd is not on board here.
You can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS, streaming on Paramount+.
Glad we wear our good jerseys.
Yeah.
All right, now it's time for the Trench Take, sponsored by Nationwide. Just like any good O-lineman can protect the QB and open lanes for the run game, Nationwide offers great insurance and great financial services. Nationwide is on your side. And you know who else was on some of the Stars' side this weekend was the offensive lines. And, you know, we started off watching those two teams from the AFC West down there in Brazil. Rashawn Slater goes down with a terrible knee injury a couple weeks ago, and I take 3 wins off the expected Chargers win total, right? It's drastic. It's catastrophic. Well, they kick over their first-round pick, Joe Alt, to the left tackle position, and he looks as boring good as I've seen an offensive tackle look in quite some time to be that young and that talented. Oh, my goodness. He made Chris Jones look human. That's awesome. So for the Chargers, leaning on your identity, you've invested in the offensive line. It's important. And you know what? That big old horse at quarterback looks pretty good too. He'll get a shout out in the Trench Takes. The other thing that stood out to me, the Buffalo Bills offensive line, and it matters. Okay, you talked about getting back up on the horse with J.J. McCarthy on Monday Night Football against the Bears. This Josh Allen gets back on the horse every single game, every single drive, and that horse is the offensive line. These 5 guys dominant. And I was told as a player that if we have the ability to run the football into the end zone, it is demoralizing for the defense. If you can hand the football to a running back, if your quarterback can run it into the end zone, your chances of winning go up exponentially. The Bills can do it at will. They rip the souls out of the Baltimore Ravens and all Ravens fans. Oh, yeah, last tip of the cap, the Minnesota Vikings. You've got a rookie quarterback, essentially. You're on the road in a hostile environment. There's fireworks. There's bears everywhere. Dennis Allen is lining up in some of the most exotic fronts you've ever seen. And you just continue to try to protect your guy. And when your number's called in the 4-minute mode and you got to run this thing out, that's what they did. Shout out to the Minnesota Vikings, Buffalo Bills, and the Los Angeles Chargers. That was the Trench Take, sponsored by Nationwide. Nationwide is so much more than a great insurance company. They're one of America's largest financial services companies, too. For your insurance and financial needs, Nationwide is on your side. Nationwide Investment Services Corporation, member FINRA, Columbus, Ohio.
I have one small take under Trench Take. I think if you have a mobile quarterback, you want to build your offensive line as such that you are trying to get firm pocket guys. You want guys who just eat bull rushes in their sleep, and so you get space. If they lose quickly, whatever. If there's space, so like how Philly's built their offensive line, and now Philly's offensive line is just insane, but like how Philly built theirs, how Buffalo's built theirs, where even when someone loses, there's so much space for your athlete back there to go create.
One guy to miss.
That it doesn't that it's not that big of a deal that someone's lost up front, because your quarterback's still going to make it right. Quarterback's going to evade. He's going to create space. And the worst thing you can have is a bunch of lighter guys up front for an athletic quarterback who are just everything's collapsing kind of in on them. Maybe no one's themselves giving up a bad pressure, but there's not space to operate. So that was just it just came up.
That was, hey, by the way, that was Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay when they had TJ Lang and Josh Sitton doing firm sets at the line of scrimmage. It gave him that pocket. That's why he was able to step up and around the stuff like we see the guy in Kansas City do, Patrick Mahomes.
All right, JP, let's get to the playbook.
All right, so these are a few plays that I really enjoyed from week 1, and just some that really stood out in terms of process and execution. The first one is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers running their touchdown, the game-winning one to Emeka Egbuka, was on a play that they ran 5 plays earlier, and it was a great way of gaining information against the Falcons defense and then hammering them with it to finish it off. So they're in an empty set right here, and that third receiver is going to run basically a little hook over the middle of the field, and then Mike Evans is going to run this little bender, this dig right here. And what happens is they're trying to put this linebacker, Divine Diablo, in a bind. They want to try and force him to be wrong. But what happens is Xavier Watts, number 31, the safety, is trying to help Divine Diablo make his decision so much easier. He's going to hammer down on that dig by Mike Evans because it's Mike Evans and you want to help him out, especially against another rookie in Billy Bowman. But what happens is Egbuka is on the far side of the field and you see all this space right here. So Baker, first play, he throws the dig to Mike Evans, and that's just gaining information. What this is basically, it's just like throwing a jab in boxing. We just want to see how you react to it. We want to see how you slip it. We want to see how you block it. But, okay, we're going to go to the touchdown. And they're running the same thing, same set, same receivers, different side. Jesse Bates is now the safety. You know you still have to help Divine Diablo in the middle of the field. They're going to run this hook, but Baker Mayfield, instead of throwing the dig, he pump fakes it to get Jesse Bates out of the window, and Egbuka is open over the top against Mike Hughes again. Throws a beautiful ball, honestly. Like, it's incredible how many heaters Baker Mayfield threw in this game, but it was such a good job by both Baker and first-year offensive coordinator Josh Grizzard in figuring out and gaining information in the biggest moment of the game. They ran the same thing. They wanted to see how the defense would react, and then they hammered them with it. So just props to the Bucs passing game, props to Baker Mayfield for taking information you got 5 plays earlier and then scoring with it later in the game. My next one is just some of the craziest throws that I've ever seen. Puka Nacua from the slot has become the new like prime Cooper Kupp, and Matthew Stafford shredded cover 3 with Puka Nacua. And how they did it was using exit motion. It's the cheat motion that everybody ran when the Dolphins first started doing it a couple years ago. But how the Rams set it up was Puka was the outside receiver and Davis Allen was in the slot. The Texans ran a lot of cover 3 in this game to kind of protect the flats, kind of protect the short areas of the field. But what that opens up is this vacant window right here where the seam, where the hash marks are. You can throw seams, you can throw posts, you can throw digs. And Puka Nacua is one of the toughest receivers in the NFL. He went out in this game on a dig over the middle where Chauncey Gardner-Johnson leveled him, still caught the ball. 6 of his 10 catches in this game came from the slot. He lined up in the slot 44% of the time in this game, career high. But just watch this throw from Matthew Stafford where he no-looks it. Matthew Stafford is the king of the no-look pass, and he's doing this with a defensive tackle in his face. But what it does is it holds the middle linebacker outside into the flat area so he can open up this void for Puka Nacua all in the span of like 2 seconds while he's getting hit in the middle of the field. Stafford, for all the questions about his back, looked like a completely new guy. I guess that immortal chamber thing actually works. He was throwing handoffs on Sunday. There was a 36-yard sail route that he throws to, I think, Tutu Atwell, drops it right in the bucket. It was incredible. There was a back shoulder fade to Devontae Adams on 3rd and 7 against Derek Stingley, one of the best corners in the game. It was like a handoff. It looked like he and Devontae Adams have been doing this thing for 12 years. So just their ability to find advantageous matchups for Puka Nacua against one of the best defenses in the league, it really made this game one of the most interesting 14-9 games I've ever seen. Matthew Stafford had one of the best 254-yard passing games I've ever seen. And it's those throws, the no looks, the seam benders that really killed them. And then my last one, the Niners look like they're back defensively. The Niners looked like they brought the physicality, they brought the pain to Seattle, especially when Seattle went big. And the way that they did it is by stealing gaps. They used a lot of blitzes. And this is one from the passing game where I think was really cool. So D. Winters, the linebacker here, is going to act like he's going to walk out over the tight end and man coverage. You want to show that it's man. But at the snap, he's going to blitz along with Upton Stout, the nickel here. And what happens is the running back, Zach Charbonnet, thinks he only has to block Upton Stout. But then D. Winters comes flying up the middle of the pass protection, and Zach Charbonnet just gets crushed. He gets crushed. He levels D. Winters levels Charbonnet. They force an incompletion. But the thing that stood out the most with this team, and you can see the guy dropping from the other side. You want to show to one side with simulated pressures to bring them from the other side. And what really stood out for the 49ers in this game was that the speed and physicality of San Francisco defenses that we know are back. And I think that's the biggest thing. Kalia Davis in the middle had a great game by just being disruptive through the middle of the defense. They needed that physicality. They needed to get big, and they needed to get their swagger back. And I think hiring Robert Saleh back was a great way to do that. And this game against Seattle was a really way to get started.
These were fun, JP. I like those a lot.
Are we worried about the Seahawks offensive line though after that game? Because it's, you said Kalia Davis had a great game. It's not as if Kalia Davis is an all-world DT. He kind of just ate up a offensive line that just had a lot of unknowns, right? It's very young. Guys like Jalen Sundell, guys like Gray Zabel who's a rookie, guys like Anthony Bradford who's in year 2. Like, it's one of the youngest interior offensive lines in the NFL. I'm
worried about that, and I'm also worried about just the lack of quality receiver options. For Seattle. They're going to have to do a lot. They're going to have to do a lot schematically to try and steal yards. They're going to have to do a lot of screens. They're going to have to throw a lot of trick plays just to try and get yards, because you're working at a disadvantage up front with the offensive line. They tried to kind of mash the 49ers, and even when the 49ers were in there, they line up really wide. So they'll have essentially like a loose 3 tech and then a shade, and they play their linebackers so wide that it leaves the B gap sort of open, but it didn't matter because they couldn't move the ball. And part of that is because Fred Warner is one of the most insane linebackers I've ever seen. There are plays where he's just like teleporting across the field, but
he's everywhere.
I'm worried about the offensive line because they couldn't move the ball in the run game. And that was supposed to be the big reason why this team was supposed to survive. And if every game is going to be on Sam Darnold's arm, we saw what happened when every game is on Sam Darnold's arm. He's going to make a great throw, and then he's going to turn the ball over.
I will say I do love for the 49ers defense Upton Stout in the slot. I think he's going to be a hell of a player. And especially, they didn't really use him much as a blitzer week 1, but he feels like that guy who's going to have half a dozen sacks each year, just because when he knifes into the backfield, it comes in a hurry. So those slot blitzes, I think, will become more of a factor going forward here for 49ers.
Hey, a few of the things I want to just say on the 3 plays. First off, we said Ibuka was going to be a home run, and we should have listened to Mike Evans, right, during training camp when he was shocked at the demeanor of this young player. And I said I believe that Ibuka's arrival will be what people expected from Marvin Harrison Jr. in terms of a guy who just knows what to do, where to be, and makes the plays. And he's got a quarterback in Baker who can make that happen. Puka, wow. Not everybody's built to play in Sean McVay's offense, particularly the receiver position. You said career high numbers of lining up in the slot. You said 44%. That's a bad boy. You can tell he's a youngest child. He's just at the bottom of the pile all the time. He just loves getting hit. And then we talked about Saleh being back in the building and the impact that can have on a culture. And we know what kind of guy Saleh is. I'd almost argue he's like a laid-back dude, which is interesting for a defensive coordinator. You think screamer, yeller, but Vic Fangio's laid-back too. And you see the way that his crew plays. So I think Saleh is a home run for them. And even if they don't have the same dudes up front that they have had historically, I think they're going to get the most out of this unit, like we saw with Washington last year, punching above their weight class up front for so many weeks.
All right, let's get to the rookies. I got 3. Do 3 every week. I didn't want to do some obvious guys, but the Penn State first rounders were sick. Abdul Carter, Tyler Warren, a lot of highly drafted guys were great. I went down the board though. Guys who went a little later, who I watched them and I'm like, oh, you gotta worry about these guys this year. They are already players. The first one we touched on the Sunday show. You did, JP, but I wanted to hammer it home. Will freaking Johnson of the Arizona Cardinals, pick 47. This guy fell to pick 47. If he stays healthy, because he fell because of injury issues, I don't think the tape was why he fell out of the first round, but he had turf toe last year. Apparently a knee issue came up at combine checks and whatever. That's why he falls to 47. But if this guy stays healthy, I think a lot of teams are going to have a lot of regrets for passing on him, because week 1, 7 targets, 4 catches, 32 yards. That's less than 5 yards per target, 2 pass breakups. When this guy was in press coverage, we went back and watched the film in press coverage, he was dominant against these Saints wide receivers. And with a guy like that, with his play style, because he's 6'2", over 200 pounds, he's a big physical corner. You worry about the speedier receivers. If he doesn't get the jam on them, what does it look like? And that's all literally the New Orleans Saints have. It wasn't a problem. It was not a problem in this game. 4 targets against press, 1 catch, 3 yards, and he was right at the catch point on that 1 catch. So, yeah, Will Johnson gives them something they really didn't have. You look at their corner group, it's a little bit on the trimmer side, at least was last year and just is without him. And he is a different cat that gives them some flexibility in the coverages that they can run. And he looked back like sophomore Will Johnson, the guy who was mocked top 5 in pretty much every mock draft heading into his junior year before the injury struck. So, yeah, if he can stay healthy, this is a huge value add to this Cardinals defense. All right, next guy. Harold Fannin Jr., pick 67. You can call him a tight end if you want, sure. I said all pre-draft, I wouldn't even consider this guy as a tight end because he's barely scraping 240. I think more realistically, he's in the 230s because he showed up at combine 240 and ran slower than everyone expected, which usually is a telltale sign that he's not 240. So watching him at Bowling Green, though, I said all pre-draft, this guy is your modern answer to light box nickel base defenses. He is the guy who basically you almost have to treat as tight end, but he's never a tight end 1. If you're going in and you're a 1 tight end usage sort of team, you're just going to be disappointed. I don't think he's ever going to block in line at that size. He'll have some limitations because of that. But if you treat him as a tight end 2, which basically doubles as a slot receiver, or a fullback, which you saw him do 3 times, saw him play inline 29 snaps, 16 snaps in the slot, 6 out wide, and then 1 at Wildcat QB. If you treat him as this like hybrid weapon that if he's matched up on your 195-pound slot corner as a blocker, he's going to kick his ass every time because he was great as a blocker in space at Bowling Green, just doesn't have the heft to really take on, a 6 tech and try to dig him out of the hole. It's just never going to happen. But if you try to tell him to go find a linebacker for a crack block, he'll get it done pretty much every single time. That's how the Browns are now using him. David Njoku and him shared the field pretty much almost all of those 55 snaps. It was not a either or, it's a both scenario, and defenses now have to account for it. And it just gives you more favorable looks in the passing game when that guy can, when matched up on a safety or linebacker, win every single time. And he can. He is a heck of an athlete, a heck of a just natural receiver. Obviously caught 7 passes in this one, had 1 drop that was fairly uncharacteristic. And you saw Flacco just looking for him. I mean, he wanted to go Harold Fannin's way. So very integral part of this offense already. And really at the guy who was 20 years old when drafted, only 21, should feasibly only be getting better at this point in his career.
Flacco used to deal with 2 tight ends. He's seen that kind of my old neighbor, Todd Heap, him and Flacco had some time. Pitta.
Yep.
And then, the first duo I think about is the thoroughbred tight end up there, Rob Gronkowski. And then I think about his buddy, Hernandez, his teammate Aaron Hernandez, and the dichotomy there, same position.
Yeah.
If they walked in the room, you'd be like, they don't play the same position. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. This is probably the closest we've seen to that duo, not to keep hampering on that duo, but obviously it was for a while there, people tried to copy it. It was the wave in the NFL. Everyone's like, how can we copy what the Patriots doing? This is kind of, the Browns are kind of getting there. That's kind of what this duo looks like for the Cleveland Browns.
Cole Kmet can block a 6 tech.
There it
You
is.
saw that. You sent me a Pass Pro clip of Cole Kmet. You said, look at this. And I'll tell you what, Cole Kmet sitting on bull rush.
Dude, Cole Kmet wants to double his salary, spend an offseason at Golden
Come
Corral.
eat with me in the offseason and then go back to Chicago.
There was a rep in the Steelers Jets game where Darnell Washington flattens an edge rusher, and I'm just like, look, man, just give me one snap at left tackle. Just give me one. Just
the way
give me
Broderick
one.
Jones playing.
Switch jerseys with Broderick Jones. You won't tell a difference.
Yep.
I mean, you will. It'll be an upgrade. All right, last rookie, Xavier Watts. Had to get a Domer in there. But this one was easy because he looks like a stud already. It reminded me of when Jesse Bates came in the NFL, which ironically is his teammate, where it's just like, oh, that guy's just got it. You know, that guy has what it takes to play safety at a really high level from a mental standpoint and from just I think a balance standpoint. To play safety in the NFL is to be able to change directions at any given time in a moment's notice without slipping, without it being clunky. You just have to be fluid. You don't necessarily have to be the most explosive, the fastest, because if you transition in a half second faster than other guys, you will get there before a guy who runs a 4.3 if you run a 4.6. That's just
starts with the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So yes. And when you watch Xavier
eyes.
Watts, that is exactly what he has. He read a slot vertical in quarters running right into Xavier Watts, and it was a Meke Buka, and he breaks on the out route, and Watts is there before Buka is. That's one of the most difficult situations you can be in as a safety in the NFL is quarter safety with a untouched vertical running right at you, because that guy can go anywhere. He can go post, he can go corner, he can just run right down your throat through the seam, or he can break back. You have to defend all basically 9 options of where that guy could go. And Xavier Watts did on that play, his very first start as a rookie. So that was amazing to see. Had 2 undercut routes that both could have been picks. One resulted in the touchdown, the first one to Meke Buka, because basically Baker Mayfield put together one of the most perfect throws you'll ever see.
Bad. He baited him so bad, and he was like 1 inch away from like the craziest interception.
Yes, Baker absolutely did not see him. It just turned out to be the perfectly placed throw. And then the other one, Baker also didn't see him. Watts didn't come down with it. A little surprising. He is a former wide receiver. I mean, he started his career at Notre Dame as a wide receiver, flipped over to safety. That's why he reads routes as well as he does. And that's why he has so many picks that he did at Notre Dame. But this guy is going to rack up him and Jesse Bates. You're going to, as a quarterback, have to think twice if you were going attacking downfield over the middle of the football field against this defense. You do not know where these guys are coming from. I do think that this defense got a big upgrade when they took Xavier Watts at pick 96. That's one where, as a scouting staff, you're just like, hell yeah. You usually pick 96. Oftentimes, you're sometimes even looking at special teamers. That's like where the 49ers drafted Jake Moody. And to get a starting safety of his quality right now, big win for the Atlanta Falcons.
And when you look at how the Falcons played defensively, a lot of their later drafted rookies shined a little bit more. I know a lot of attention was on Jalen Walker, James Pierce, who I thought both played fine. Wasn't spectacular, but wasn't outwardly like bad. But Billy Bowman and Xavier Watts had 2 really good games. I thought Bowman was everywhere. He had a sack on Baker Mayfield it looked like Billy Bowman at Oklahoma, where he's just like bat out of hell flying into the backfield. But Xavier Watts, when I was watching him at Notre Dame, I said his ball skills and the ability to always be around the ball sort of reminded me of Cam Bynum, who also had an interception on Sunday against the Dolphins, because he just knows where the ball is going to be. That's something that you can't teach, those instincts. And that showed up immediately. There was a play, he prevents a touchdown on, I think, like an angle screen to, I think it was Bucky Irving. And if he doesn't make that shoestring tackle, Bucky Irving's walking into the end zone. So his ability to always be around the ball is something that's so impressive at a young age. And like you said, him and Jesse Bates, you're going to have to think twice about throwing the ball downfield.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. After this, our Upon Further Review segment, going to tie a bow on week 1 by giving our takes from the week that was. Right after this.
You can't count on Derek's tong skills.
Oh, Tony, I think it hit the ground.
But you can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount+.
All right, I'll kick it off. I think the 35-yard touchback is cheapening scoring. I think it stinks. Now, obviously, from the NFL's perspective, you're going to get more game-winning drives. You're going to get more scoring because of it. But the fact that you can go from a touchback to one late hit on your quarterback, and if you have a kicker that has a boomer, you can have a game-winning drive that takes little to no effort whatsoever. It feels cheaper. I want to see teams earn it. I don't care if scoring is down. It's going to be down because defense coordinators have figured out basically how to put caps on modern offenses. That no one is playing man coverage 60% of the snaps you saw from defenses a decade ago. It just doesn't exist. You can't do it in the modern NFL. But they figured out ways to basically make teams earn it themselves by putting together drives down the football field and limiting explosive plays. Putting the touchback at 35 is just like, oh man, they are in. It just doesn't feel right to have 20-yard scoring drives. It's just wrong, in my opinion. And I think every day we stray further from God's light.
You need to work for something. Got to work for something if you're an offense. I do think
participation trophy culture.
The thing that is, I guess, the spin zone for the touchback is special teams has never become more of a weapon now, because if you have a kicker who can kind of I'm not saying like have it. I think the biggest thing before was having a kicker who could just boom the ball into the end zone and make teams start from the 20 was always going to be a big thing that you look for. But now it's about finding kickers who can, instead of hitting it with the driver, you want to get it up and down onto the green without losing any momentum. So I think the importance of getting it into the landing zone is huge. But yeah, I'm not for it. I want to see offenses matriculate down the field again.
Why didn't we?
They should just line up the offenses at the 20-yard line and just do away with the kickoff.
Well, why instead of? I think the kickoff's an exciting play. I don't want to do away with it. Why don't we just move the kickoff? We literally moved the kickoff forward in like 2011 to the 35, right? Why don't we move it back to like the 25 so that basically you can't reach the end zone? Because the guys line up already way further. It's not about guys having to run so far. Why don't we make the kickers move way back so basically there's no chance they're reaching the end zone? And if they do, it should behoove them, and it should stay at the 20. Like that's how you increase returns, is not to have this weird in between where every drive starting seemingly the 30 or later. I think it's cheapening scoring and is not the answer to what we've seen from scoring right now. I just don't think it is.
Okay. I like that. Look, we talked about Caleb at length, so I think I'll just say this in brief. His issues last year were throwing the football on time, getting through his progressions. He threw it on time more often than not last night, but the accuracy showed up. If you're Ben Johnson and you see more of the same, let's call it 3, 4, 5 weeks in a row, what is your patience level? And at what point do you say that this is not indicative of who I am as a coach? And I'm not saying this is my opinion, but I do speak for the masses in Chicago, and my mentions, whether in support of Caleb or in another direction with Caleb, they're plentiful. There's a lot of opinions. And we've heard the whispers for a long time through multiple quarterback administrations. When I was there, it was Josh McCown playing 8 games my rookie year, and he threw for like 2,000 yards.
Lit it up, dude. Made himself like 50.
And I was like, oh my God, a quarterback controversy. I've never been part of one of these. And it was, awkward. For Ben Johnson, who's trying to get off on the right foot as a head coach, first-time head coach, what, in your opinion, or how long is how much patience do you have?
Unfortunately, it's up to Ryan Poles. It seems like it's up to Ryan Poles there about how much patience you have, because he just got an extension this offseason to match with Ben Johnson's contract, basically. And you are not, as the GM, it's going to have to take an Anthony Richardson level of fail, right? I mean, it's going to have to take true failure at the NFL level to bench that guy 2 years in. That's unfortunately
when you're on
teabags, it's lighting the shit up.
50 yards, and you know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't all rainbows and sunshine for the Chicago Bears. It wasn't, everybody's quick to point at Caleb, and I understand that's what, they spoon feed you that opportunity to talk about the quarterback poorly. But there was a lot of other issues there. I think that if we can get a better sample size, a cleaner sample size of what Caleb looks like in a vacuum without the procedural penalties and botch jet sweep to DJ Moore, like all that timing stuff, then we'll get a better idea of Caleb. But man, I don't know. These are the things I think about. And I know that people are thinking about this guy right here because funny enough, when he comes in the preseason, it looks like everything's on time and rhythm, and particularly I don't want to say down the field throws, but the intermediate throws, the ones that aren't at or around the line of scrimmage, seem to be confident coming out of this young man's hand. Yeah.
I think they give him time. I think, like you said, in 2022, when Ben Johnson first started calling plays for the Lions, through the first 9 weeks, they were a below average offense. They were 19th in EPA per play. They didn't hit their stride yet. And I think with how much the expectations have been raised with Ben Johnson, how highly we think of the offensive core, it is also worth mentioning, and it's also worth remembering that these are all still young guys. Like your wide receiver one, Rome Odunze, basically is a second-year player. DJ Moore's learning a new offense. You have guys that you're counting on who are very young, and Luther Burden, Colston Loveland, Caleb Williams is very young. They're still trying to figure out what this offense is going to be. So I give it time. Like Mike said, it would take a calamitous drop. It would have to be like he just forgets how to throw a football. Like it would take like somebody like stealing all of his ability, like the Monstars in Space Jam, to really like say, okay, we got to pull the plug. But I think,
yeah, I mean, when you saw Bryce Young, like when Bryce Young, that was bench worthy play.
Yeah,
what you saw. If it looked like that, you would say, okay, just give the guy a freaking breather. Mentally, it's not.
Because as a player, I'm like, Caleb gives us a chance because of all of his athleticism, because of the throws you see him making out of rhythm of the offense, outside the pocket. Like, it's there. When he's not thinking, the ball gets delivered in a manageable spot for the receivers. But it seems, to me, at least, a non-QB guru, that there are certain it's like when I line up on a tee box, there is no chance that I'm going to hit the fairway. I'm just going to tell you that right now. So like I hit a 5-iron and I try to get it past the ladies' tee and just onto the short grass. You know, I'm not trying to go pound town, but I wonder if that's the feeling that he has.
I do think yesterday he looked jumpy. He looked amped. He was really excited for this game. And you could tell in some of his passes, he was just letting them fly. He was throwing 100 miles an hour. And I think to an extent, there were some plays that he kind of left downfield because of all the scrambling, and the scrambling was working. But I do think Ben Johnson's going to have to help him toe the line between, okay, let's slow it down. You don't have to get everything back in one play versus, all right, here's when you want to go and be aggressive. Here's a situation where I'm dialing this up for you. This is what you're going to go hit. And I think that's needed for young quarterbacks. I really do think that the expectations kind of, I'm not going to say they get out of whack because he is a number one pick, but you got to remember that we can't keep throwing guys the entire playbook, master's level stuff from week one and expect them to have the mastery of it by the first 2 games of the season. Like this stuff takes a process. We saw it with Jaden Daniels last year. We saw it with Bo Nix last year. They didn't start improving and start to get to where they are now until they had to learn to start the season. Jaden Daniels was not great to start last year. So I think just giving him time and giving him the ability to unlock more stuff in the offense. I hate to compare it to a video game, but it is like a video game. You know, you can't go in and try and beat the Elden Ring boss in the first 5 minutes of the game, or you will get your ass whooped. You got to go and start early. You got to start with the small stuff and build yourself up to that point.
It's like when I first started playing Street Fighter, all I knew was jab and block, and little did I know that Guile has 57 moves, including a special move, Sonic Boom. But maybe he ain't ready to Sonic Boom. We got to just land some jabs first.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing, though, and Harry, make sure to tweet this out, is Kyle Long calls for Tyson Bagent to start in Chicago, is what I heard here.
What's that?
I'm not sure if I'm paraphrasing you correctly, but I just heard Kyle Long's calling for Tyson Bagent to start in Chicago.
No, I'm not. I'm not. But I can I can empathize with a fan base who has been without answer at the quarterback position for a very long time. And I'm not jumping ship on Caleb Williams because I've been vocally very supportive of this young man, and I've met him, and I feel like I have somewhat of a distant relationship with him, and I'd support anybody that I consider to be my buddy. And if I've schizophrenia in my way into being friends with Caleb Williams here. Did you hear that? I don't have his number or anything, but you got to give a guy with that kind of talent a chance. And you have to feel really good about if something were to happen or the play were to get so catastrophic that Tyson Bagent can step in and be the guy and be on time and in rhythm, because we've seen the offense work with him too.
All right, JP, what's your next one?
My first one, I think the Lions offense is going to be fine. I think the biggest thing that was on display against the Packers was not how much they missed Ben Johnson, but how much they missed Frank Ragnow, the all-pro stalwart center who, one, not only was one of the best centers in the game, but two, helped set the protections, helped to organize the offense up front when it comes to pass pro. And watching Green Bay sort of tee off on two first-year starters and a guy in Graham Glasgow who's playing center for the first time in a long time, it just makes you remember that having a really good center changes so much about an offense. I think they're going to be fine because you want to get these reps in for the young guys. You want to get Tate Ratledge and Christian Mahogany these kinds of reps early in the season. Yeah, it looked bad. It'll probably look bad for the first couple of games, but getting these guys reps now and letting them improve as the season goes on is going to be important. The guys have talent. I thought Christian Mahogany, he was drafted in the 5th round. I thought he should have been drafted a lot earlier, but Tate Ratledge felt like a very Detroit Lions player. They have the talent. It's just now about like having those reps. And that's going to be the biggest thing. It's not the fact that they missed the play caller, because there's not much you can do when you have young guys going up against Micah Parsons, who was amped up for his first game in a New Jersey after the craziest trade in the NFL that I've seen since like 2018. So they'll be fine. There are going to be some growing pains with the youth, but the biggest thing is not having a stalwart center really changes a lot for that offense.
Yeah, I came away saying two things. One, Edgerrin Cooper was an insanely good draft pick, if only because he's one of the only linebackers in the NFL that can actually find Jahmyr Gibbs in space. Like that, he was the game changer in that game in terms of when he was one-on-one with Jahmyr Gibbs, it was not an issue. Most guys have issues with Jahmyr Gibbs. Edgerrin Cooper did not. And then two, that was the interior of the Packers defensive line has to thrive because they're so light. They have to thrive by creating chaos. And that was not what you wanted to see week one from the Lions offensive line, given how young they are. They'll get better over the course of the season, but they did not have, they were not well equipped given everyone playing new positions here to handle what the Packers were throwing at them.
The Lions were a team that when everybody in the stadium knew that they were going to run the football, they could get it done last year. And it started with the tip of the spear, Frank Ragnow. And I'm glad you've tipped your cap to Frank, because what a badass, consummate professional. And they're going to miss him. And to your point about pass protection and pre-snap communication, that's all true. But if you've been around an offensive line room, as I know you guys have, and you love the sport, you know that the center is the leader off the field as well. And whether it's O-line dinners and watching, blitz cut-ups, or making sure that you understand what you're going to be facing against X, Y, and Z this week. The center is the guy who organizes everything in most places. Creed Humphrey, prime example of that in Kansas City. And centers, man, they are so important. And that's the big takeaway I had was I think Ben Johnson's exodus was not quite as important as the reshuffling on that offensive line.
All right, my next point. I don't think there's ever been more quarterback talent in the NFL. I think we're entering a quarterback golden era. Now, not to say that, there haven't been ages where we had like more Hall of Famers, but I'm saying the amount of teams that have a shot with their quarterback, that if they had the Eagles roster, could be in the Super Bowl, if they really put it together, is so far and away more than I think, no one's trotting out a Brian Hoyer and being like, hey, let's see if it works this year for Brian Hoyer. No, there's no trotting out a guy who's an obvious problem around the NFL. There's only, Saints, Browns. That's really it right now. Who are trotting out problems at quarterback, 5th round, 2nd-year guy, and a 40-year-old Joe Flacco. The Jets, Giants, Colts, maybe Seahawks and Raiders aren't paying and have franchise sort of guys just yet. I wouldn't put the Raiders in there because I think Geno Smith is, but like you could say maybe with those teams, but they're all starting quarterbacks who have had some point success in their careers. And so I think we're only going to see more of this. I think we're only going to get more quarterback talent because everyone wants to say, oh, they do 7-on-7 now in high school. And that's maybe a little bit part of it, that the passing game has proliferated to younger levels. But to me, the bigger thing is quarterback mechanics have proliferated to younger levels. You do not see guys coming into even college now throwing like they are pitchers coming off a mound anymore with big strides. And, remember Josh Allen, who would just, way over the top. Guys have basically, quarterback mechanics have been figured out to a degree. And guys are learning it now when they first pick up a football instead of when they first get to the NFL, which was kind of the case even as recently as probably 10, 15 years ago, where guys having to get their mechanics completely overhauled. It's just a rarity now. That's happening at lower and lower levels. And I think because of that, you are seeing talent proliferating there on the NFL, and why like parity is so tight right now. And I think the game is more popular than ever because you're not seeing teams who are just flat out duds. You don't see a lot of teams that just stink out loud anymore. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing, in my opinion, for the NFL.
I want to give a shout out to my guy, Brian Hoyer. He was the only Bears quarterback in history to throw for at least 300 yards in 4 consecutive games. Brian, if you're listening, I love you. I will handle Michael. Okay. I will handle him.
I think it's really cool just seeing all of the young quarterbacks in the league, especially because we've seen how the college game has changed and how the translation of college to the NFL has changed. And I think that you're starting to see a lot more offenses in the NFL sort of accept that college-y style of offense. They're accepting more college-y style concepts. We've been talking about it since RG3 came into the NFL with the read option stuff, but now there's much more college-y concepts in passing offenses. There's much more familiarity. And I think that's the biggest thing when you have, I hate to compare it to a normal job, but when you're onboarding a new hire, you don't want to make them like throw them to the deep ocean on the first day on the job. You want to kind of ease them into it, get them to do stuff that he knows, get them to do stuff that they're familiar with and can maximize their ability on. And I think offensive coordinators have gotten so good at maximizing the things that their quarterback does well and minimizing those things that they aren't good at right now and giving that time to develop.
I like the point you made about development happening earlier for these athletes, and it's permeated all sports. I mean, specialists, gurus, skill trainers, Instagram, TikTok. Everybody out there is I make fun of everybody because everybody's a guru, right? But at the end of the day, trickle down theory, all these kids are learning some good stuff. You throw a bunch of stuff at the wall, some good stuff might stick. And I hadn't even thought about it, Mike, but yeah, the old throwing mechanics of like football players throwing it like baseballs. Now everybody's throwing darts. Everybody looks
rotational,
looks the right way, and they've cracked the code. And we see it in other positions too.
And well, I think you also see it.
Skill works. What do you got, Mike?
I was gonna say you also see it in baseball too, in that everyone throws 100 now. Like
100%.
And it's not just because they, I remember as a kid, I had to drive 20 minutes to the next town over to get to the one guy who knew how to throw a baseball like the correct way to learn how to like pitching mechanics. And
what
it's like, his name was Joe Yeager. The guy was awesome. And all he was just like a junior college pitcher who actually he himself got instruction. And it's like nowadays there's a zillion guys on TikTok who will like, you could DM and they'll be like, hey, yeah, and send a video of, and they'll do it right there. So it really is And once you have the correct form, and once you're doing things in a manner that is, kinesthetically accurate or kinesthetically optimal, shall we say, then it's just pure growth from there. Then you don't have to worry about it. You're not fighting yourself week after week. It's just, how much you're willing to work at it. So
you sink to the level of your mechanics and preparation. And when those things go out the window, you see bad performances.
Yep.
Yeah, I had a trainer who when he would always say when I was growing up playing football, if you're tired, if you're late in the game, focus on technique, focus on mechanics, because that's when it really starts to come through. And I think like with your point about trainers being everywhere, Mike, I think it's important. Like sports science and the knowledge about the game has grown so much to where, like you said, you can find somebody on TikTok. You can watch a YouTube video of somebody like breaking down mechanics and going.
Tom Brady did one where he's like, "Here's how you throw a football." It's like, okay, sick.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I'll just go watch Tom Brady teach me how to throw a football. Like there's a kicker for Hawaii who made the game-winning kick to beat Stanford a couple weeks ago.
Yes,
he learned how to kick off of YouTube.
Yes,
the knowledge of the game and the access to this knowledge has grown so much to where we're seeing more talented guys come into the NFL because all the knowledge is everywhere. Everybody knows a little bit.
And that's why also, I think from a scouting perspective, to take this kind of, not to go too deep down this rabbit hole, but like if you see guys who are really raw in certain ways coming in the NFL nowadays, it's like that to me is more of a red flag on how much they want it, because it's all like, even if you're at a smallish school, it's like it's all there if you really wanted to learn it. If you really want to go learn your craft, you can find the information nowadays. Whereas 15 years ago, if a guy was raw, he may have not come across anyone his entire life who knew how to, have any sort of pass rushing move, mechanics or whatever. Nowadays, it's just, if you want to seek it out, you'll find it. So just a different atmosphere, different, basically, like you said, level of talent or level of competency entering the NFL nowadays.
So that kicker was Kansei Matsuzawa, Japanese-born kicker for the University of Hawaii. When I was growing up, it was like, if you don't live in football, if you don't live in the United States, you're not going to be able to play football because you don't know what we teach and blah, blah, blah. If that's the tip of the spear, beware of the 7'2" Chinese quarterback who's going to come over. Yao Ming's cousin's going to come over. He's going to see over everybody. He's going to have the biggest arm. He can run. I'm just telling you, we're going global. You see it with Jordan Mailata. Okay, Oceania showing up big time on the All-Pro list, buddy. Okay, football's everywhere.
Are we going to get a Shohei Ohtani come over?
Bro, can you imagine if Shohei Ohtani was just like, I want to focus on quarterback, you're going to tell me that he couldn't go out there and do that?
There's actually a bowl game, or not a bowl game, but it's I think they call it the Ivy Bowl, where they take the all-stars from the Ivy League and they play the best college football team in Japan. And they broadcast it on ESPN one year. I want to go and just watch the game so bad. I shout out to my friend Alex Katzen, who wants to go and cover this game. We're gonna go cover that game. It's incredible. And again, it goes to show you the proliferation of the sport around the world. I think it's called the Ivy Bowl. The Ivy League a couple years ago beat Japan 24-20 in Tokyo.
We should somehow get to be the announcing team for the Ivy Bowl. CBS,
we got to
get the right for this. We'll announce. All right, JP, end us with your final point here.
All right, my final point is, if you cannot change the picture or will not change the picture up front, then your defense is DOA in 2025. The best defenses can dictate protections. And the reason I came up with this, while I was watching Texans Rams, and just how bad the Texans looked in pass protection, because all the Rams would do is just poke holes in their pass pro. I think the Texans would 4-man slide a lot. And so all the Rams would do is, like, it was the second drive of the game, they sent a stunt with Jared Verse on the opposite of the 4-man slide and a nickel coming behind him. The running back scans to the 4-man side and then leaves, and there are 2 free runners. And CJ Stroud makes the play, but again, you're making things so much more difficult on the offensive line. You are forcing everything to happen quicker, and there's so much more to process up front. When you look at the best teams, the best defenses by success rate in week 1, you look at Denver, Jacksonville, the Rams, Washington, and surprisingly Atlanta. And I think Atlanta did a really good job of messing with Tampa's protection rules against a team that was missing Tristan Wirfs and moved Graham Barton to left tackle, I think like an hour before the game. So the best defenses have this ability to line up and force you to think one thing and then change post snap and get a free runner. We've talked a lot about how defenses change the picture post snap when it comes to coverage rotations, but now they're starting to catch up front and starting to tie everything together. And I think that being able to do that really helps set your defense from good to great.
I agree. It's like there's nothing more frustrating than honestly not knowing what you're looking at as an offensive lineman. And there's so many guys who are tweeners now at the second level of the defense who possess, honest to goodness, pass rush ability. And when that's the case, there's a couple guys, we call him Waldo. It's like wherever Waldo is, we're going to take the protection there. There's 2 Waldos on every defense. Every front 7 now has guys that are interchangeable, can run these stunts. And to your point, you get that 4-man slide. It puts somebody in a bind over there. Your eyes can only be in one spot. I'm telling you, people just don't understand how much of a nightmare it is to have chosen offensive line is the thing that I made my living on.
It is hilarious looking back how, there's a point, when I even started at PFF where it was like the 4-3-3-4 designation was like a meaningful, that was your front. That is what you lined up in. That is what you showed. Fronts are now
amoeba
play to play. They're completely meaningless in terms of not the 4-3-3-4 designation isn't that meaningless in terms of like personnel and what they use, but your front, just because you run a 4-3, is not going to be the 4-3 under like the Tampa Bay Bucks were back to this. It's not
front
just
identification is amoeba. It is an amoeba,
and basically what people started doing maybe 15-ish or so years ago on third downs is now trickling into first and second down, where it's like you don't want any defense to be able to identify where a guy's going to be, what his responsibility is. And some of that's been because they realize that, hey, we don't have to have gap control if we have 2 deep safeties. If we have 2 guys that can clean up any of our runs, we're not going to give up big runs when we have 2 deep safeties, when we have 2 guys that can come clean up. Maybe we'll get gashed here and there, but it is way more important to create chaos for the quarterback not to know what the heck is going on. And so disguises that used to happen just with the back end players are now what you're getting on front 7 players, basically from first through third down. And I 100% agree with your point that if you're not doing that, if you are, Gus Bradley circa 2016, and you want to just go cover 3, 80% of your snaps and not disguise a damn thing, you're toast. That can be beaten. The book is out. That every OC from high school to the NFL knows how to beat that defense now. So you basically have to make quarterbacks not know what they're beating is the way to win consistently in NFL. It's limit big plays and make a quarterback not know what he's doing so that you'll get 1 negative play. Because once you get that 1 negative play, basically that drive is over.
You want to make them think. And I think that's a big thing, especially like I'd even throw the Colts in there, even though they weren't among the top 5 in success rate. But what Lou Anarumo did to the Dolphins, where all they would do is they just drop 8. They would force Tua to think after the snap because everything would change. You would think that you're getting like cover 3 and then they drop 8 into Tampa 2 or something. And it's so important to force them to think, force them to react on the fly. And you're starting to see it, especially with teams going under center. You saw teams go under center play action against a lot of static defenses because they know where everything is going to be. But then you're starting to see the Texans actually did it to the Rams a couple times. They would blitz the linebacker to under center play action because you don't know where he's going to be after you turn your back to the defense. So I think one of the cool things that you're starting to see is you're starting to see a whole lot more teams go back to the under center 3-step drop, which I'm just like, return to Bill Walsh. The Seahawks did it a couple times. The Rams did it. The Texans did it. I even think the Packers did it against the Lions, where they just pulled out like under center 3-step drop like it was 1990. But you're starting to see teams do more of the, if they're showing a simulated pressure look, and we saw it against Chicago against Minnesota, just run it. Just run it at these looks. So I'm curious how offenses sort of fight back against these pressure looks, how to dictate protections, and where it's going to go in 2025, because it's really fun watching them sort of tee off and show these cool games.
I will say, as a film analyst, it's the golden era too. We are entering because defenses are finally fighting back against what the offense has been doing for the last decade or so. All right, that's our show. We will be back tomorrow breaking down. What are we breaking down on tomorrow's show?
Breaking down
power
emotionally.
Tiers. Forgot
It's
about
Power
the
Tiers
tiers.
Day.
We're doing our power tiers are back. So we'll be ranking every team into tiers. Until then, thanks so much for tuning in. Keep pushing.